Namaste. Welcome to Transcend, a place for daily spiritual wisdom and inspiration. So today I've been getting a lot of inquiries about love because it's such a popular topic actually. It's everyone in the world is constantly thinking about love, talking about love, trying to understand the ways of love. Psychologists, teachers, doctors, philosophers, spiritualists. Everyone wants to know about love. Everyone wants to feel loved, pretty much. Maybe there's a few that don't, but that is also just a covering of the modes of nature, the covering energy that makes us feel like we don't want love. So the Atma, the spirit soul, wants love, and that is the reality. Everyone is a loving unit. So before I get into the subject matter, the two questions are, is love bondage to this material world and to this material paradigm, or is love freedom from this paradigm? It's a very complex question. And there's two words that in Sanskrit that will help us to understand this topic. One is kama. Kama means desire. It can mean lust, desire. It can mean wanting. So, and on the other side, there's something called prema, which means divine love. It's a spiritual type of love. And so, in short, the basic point is that in the material world, when one is striving, love can be called selfless. It can also be called selfish. There's two types of love. And so love that's in connection with the fulfillment of our own desires, our own egotistical desires, they may be innocent. They may be not innocent. They may be selfless in a sense. Say like giving charity. These are types of giving love. And one is, okay, I want to eat this, so I want to go get this, and I love it, so I'm going to do that. So love is very subjective in all these ways, as you can understand. Everyone has a different opinion on what they love, how they feel love. So love is a very broad subject, but in the most primal way to understand love is that the soul, love of the soul, love of the self, and focusing that energy on a higher soul. In Sanskrit, that's called Paramatma. Paramatma means oversoul or super soul. So to focus our loving aspirations and our loving desires on an ego that is not our own. It's good to focus it on other living entities within our purview, within our preceptorial surroundings. Or it's also better to focus that loving energy on divinity, on the divine within people, without people, and furthermore, focusing on the source of this love, the source called Brahman, or in English, God, and in Sanskrit, Krishna, Vishnu. So there's so many names for God, we won't get into that. So anyway, love is when it's based on our own intrinsic wanting, our own materialistic hankering to satisfy our senses, to satisfy our emotional wants, our emotional needs, the senses of the tongue, eyes, ears, touch. These are actually love in its perverted form, called kama, as I described before. And this kama is a place of bondage. This kama is a source of extreme bondage. And it's bondage in accordance with the amount that you are submerged in its existence. Basically, if your kama is related with the material body, that's not such a good one, because the material body is temporary. Therefore, these loving manifestations are also temporary, and therefore when they come and go, you'll feel despair, you'll feel depression, frustration, anger. I want this so much. Why is it going away so quickly? Our youth, in youth we feel very, we have so many desires that we fulfill in our youth, and then say we want beauty. In youth, it's seen that beauty is more in the youth. And as one ages, then they get older and their beauty is waning. It's declining. So the point is that focusing our loving energy on bodily things, this is the worst type of love. Not that we can not love our body. We should respect our body as our vehicle, and we should love it, but not from the ego standpoint, from the false ego. We should understand and love the body and everything in relation to it with the true ego, the spiritual identity called Atman or Jiva, the soul ego. So that's something entirely different. And when we see the body, we can respect it and love it and try to take care of it. So this is a better type of love. It's a more sattvic type of love. And it's even a spiritual type of love. But it's still based, it's not prema, because your love is focused on your own self. Prema is from your unit of consciousness to another unit of consciousness. So that's the difference there. And and then furthermore, when we keep our love in intellectual things, this isn't the body per se, but it's the astral body, the mind, ego, intellect complex of the subtle dimension of the self. And so that desires that are in accordance with that, like gathering knowledge or doing the right thing, loving those types of things is on a higher stage than that in connection with the material body. And some practices that implement that type of love is called jnana yoga, which means yoga of the intellect, yoga of knowledge, and acquiring perception via the mind. And there's also karma yoga, which is a type of morality. It's a moral way of living life. And people do that to also feel good in their mind and their intellect. And those are nice. Those are good practices. They're not spiritual, but they're good practices, and they can lead to spirituality. The spiritualist, the other types of yoga, or the more prominent one, which we'll talk about now, is bhakti yoga, which is the yoga, the place, the marg, the path, in English, the path of devotional love. That type of yoga, to unite with all of existence through devotional love. So that love is connected with the soul. That is what bhakti is. And that bhakti has different layers and different stages. But in the highest form of bhakti, called Uttama Bhakti, one perceives everything in existence in connection with the divine source, with its divine, true constitutional nature. And how? Because everything is connected. Everything is an extension or an expansion of the divine source, Brahman or Krishna, Vishnu. So by practicing bhakti, one is fulfilling the desire to give love from the soul to the soul. And that's also, that can be perceived within this body, within the subtle body and gross body, but it can become tricky in the sense that someone may feel like their mind is their soul. So that's a tricky part. And this is where bhakti is the selfless giving of oneself to the divine. And it's not about doing charity. It's not about, it's not even necessarily about doing moral things. See, there's a saying, bhakti is the highest culmination of spiritual love. And in that love, one isn't even concerned with sense gratification, which means the acquiring of sense objects for our own pleasure. They're not entertained with economic development, which means acquiring wealth to set ourselves up in a situation, practicing bhakti to set ourselves up with wealth. So they don't care so much about wealth, and they don't care so much about dharma. Even the spiritualist, the transcendentalist, doesn't care a lot about dharma. They act, dharma means the functioning moral code of the universe and of our existence. And so as a human, there's dharmas for different species and different types of life. But as a human, we have a specific dharma, and that's a moral code. And that also is subservient to spiritual love. And next is mukti. Liberation is also subservient to spiritual love. And why? Why are all these things subservient to spiritual love? Because spiritual love alone, bhakti, prema, this is the only place where a person can feel completely sheltered in. They can feel no worry, no depression, no anxiety, no feeling of dissatisfaction. And liberation, you would say, how is liberation not satisfying? How is attaining Brahman, attaining oneness, sayudhya mukti, how is that not satisfying? And it is satisfying. It actually, realization of the self, that's what Brahman realization is. Realization of the self as a unit of bliss. A bliss, wanting bliss and giving bliss. That is what the soul is. So how to acquire bliss and how to give bliss? Now that's the real trick, and that's where prema, divine love, bhakti, that's where they come in, because as we've described, types of bliss or happiness can come from those previous layers of enjoyment, such as enjoyment in connection with the material body or the intellect or the subtle reality of our life. But it finds its highest point in Sanskrit. There's many words. There's actually about 10 different stages of prema, and they lead to the highest stage called Mahabhav, which we don't it's beyond the scope of this presentation to to talk about that, but the point is that bhakti is the practice of giving true, genuine soul love to Bhagavan, to the source of our own self. And that, if we come from there, then obviously it's going to have everything that we want to feel love in that way. So, for instance, just as an example, in the realm where Krishna and his associates are living eternally, they have different types of relationships with Krishna, and each relationship one feels totally satisfied. And so, for instance, if in this world, if I'm a man, I am a man in this body. So anyway, in this, I feel like I'm a male, and I want friendship. I want love from a partner, a feminine partner, and I want to feel like I want parents. I want maybe someday to be a parent. So these are examples of types of emotions, emotional love that one is very desperately and wanting to acquire within this world. And so in the spiritual world, in one of the dimensions where Krishna is located, there's unlimited forms of God in the spiritual dimensions, and which the breaking level of the material cosmos and the spiritual cosmos is Brahman. It's the place where jivas, where souls, Atma, the souls, they emanate from that undifferentiated energetic expansion. It's ever expansive. But so anyway, in the spiritual dimensions called lokas, called Krishna loka in this instance, the living entity, they attain a type of bhakti, a type of prema that is so overwhelmingly absorbing that they forget about everything else. And this is, of course, a transcendental ideal. It's not that we just put that into practice in this world, like right now in our current state of conditioning, but it's an ideal that we aspire for. And the reason why these types of ideals are so wonderful is because they're eternally relishable. So for instance, the gopis, the cowherd girlfriends of Krishna, they eternally feel satisfaction and love that is never diminishing. It's actually always increasing. That's the one major difference between spiritual and material dimensions, is that in the material world, love and desire and enjoyment is decreasing steadily, whereas in the spiritual world, it's increasing steadily. And so the gopis, they feel totally satisfied. They don't have to aspire for any other relationship other than their own conjugal relationship with Krishna. They're completely overwhelmed with ecstatic love for that. And so there's different types of relationships but every relationship within this material world is a fragmental reflection of a divine type of loving relationship in the spiritual world. And that is our true constitutional want, our true constitutional nature. That's why we can all say that we feel totally in the material world. You're just, the satisfaction factor is just not nearly as resplendent as it could be in the spiritual domain. And It's not that we don't love people in the material world. It's just that we have to understand the transitory nature of the material and subtle bodies. That's the point. If we see with the eyes of true divine love in the spiritual way, then we can see everything underneath it exactly as it is. There's no confusion. There's no illusions. There's no conditions that can cover us and overwhelm us. And so by engaging in this practice, one gradually elevates themselves by engaging in bhakti, divine love for God, for Krishna, for the source, for Bhagavan, for Ram, for Sita. She is the goddess of Ram. So there's unlimited forms of God. And by engaging in this bhakti, divine love, one is completely freed from their lower, as I said, illusions. And we can still engage in loving people in this world. Of course we do. But as I said before, the main difference is the seat of consciousness. Where our energy is coming from. Is it coming from the body? Is it coming from the intellect? Is it coming from the mind? Or is it coming from the Atman, or otherwise the heart, the soul? Is it coming from the soul platform? Because if it is, then you're not going to have any problems with understanding why your love is getting frustrated. So gradually we elevate to this platform called prema, divine love. And that is beyond freeing. That is so freeing that one is never caught in bondage again, because prema, its nature is that it's ever expanding, and it's so powerful that it burns karma to ashes. It burns kama, lust, to ashes. It burns everything to ashes. And all that's left is true divine love, living in the unity of the entire existence of souls, of prakriti, material energy, spiritual energy, Swarup Shakti. So all these things, they find their full harmony and union in divine love. And divine love is what connects them so nicely. Just like a string is holding pearls so nicely, it looks so beautiful. If the pearls are all over the place, it's not so much as good as when the pearls are strung very beautifully. So that's what yoga is. That's what the yoga of love is. And that's what we wanted to talk about in this discussion. And so that is the liberating type of love. And then on the other side is the bonding type of love. When you love in connection with temporary existences, then you're creating karma, and you will be bound to you'll be bound to suffer and be bound to be caught up in despair and depression in the loss of that type of love, or in the loss, the diminution. I can't, that word is not coming to me right now. But anyway, I think you get the point, is that that love, when it degrades, then our happiness will also degrade. So that's why, and that is the bondage, is that we build our desires. As long as we have desires running in this material existence, we're going to stay in this material universe and keep going in the cycles of birth and death, samsara. And so we have to break free. We have to get free of all this. And we just have to go for divine love. Why isn't that binding? Because it's rooted in the eternal consciousness, in the eternal domain, in the higher grander scheme of spiritual reality. So I hope all that made sense for you guys. It's a little bit of a complicated topic, but hopefully it made sense. And thank you for coming to share your time with me. And hope you guys have a nice day. And if you have any questions, just feel free to put them in the comment feed. I'll answer them. And if you have any topics that you want me to talk about, just feel free to let me know. Hope you guys have a nice day. Namaste.